It's giving me way too many options.
Yeah, I've never.
We're down the rabbit hole. This is Talking Palates. I'm your host, Daniel Crosier, and I'm here with the phenomenal Greg Guler. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. So, Greg, first question out of the gate. Who are you and where do you come from and why do you do the magnificent things that you do?
Well, I'm Greg Guler. I am a animation designer, character designer, and I've been one since, well, probably about 92 or so. I worked at Disney for a long time. I started on Darkwing Duck in 1991 was my first show. And I started on that show as a prop designer.
Wow.
Well, yeah, a prop in an animated cartoon is everything in the cartoon that moves that isn't a character.
Okay.
If Darkwing Duck came into a room and picked up a TV and threw it through a window, I'd have to design the TV front and back,
Nice.
and also the window, because the window breaks, and so you'd have to design the pieces of the window. So I did that initially. But I grew up in North Dakota, in a small town called New Rockford, and I don't think they exactly knew what to do with me there, because I was into comics, and when I think about what people have now to look at due to the internet and everything else,
yeah,
it was astonishing. We had a comic book rack and 3 channels.
Yeah.
Of those 3 channels, we got 1 channel at our house.
Yeah.
So it was Lost in Space and
oh, nice.
Wild Wild West, and stuff like that. And later, of course, Star Trek when we got all 3 channels. But anyway, so I was always drawing, reading comics. Neil Adams came on the scene in comics and blew my mind.
Nice. Yeah.
Mainly, I think, because his style was so realistic. It almost looked like photos. So, Jack Kirby was really cool, but it was very stylized.
Yeah.
And when Neil Adams came on the scene, holy smokes, this is like watching a TV show of Batman. And so I always kind of I always had loved animation. And of course, I watched. In those days, we had shows that came on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'd show old cartoons, like really old ones, like the old Pop Fleischer Popeyes.
Yeah,
And,
nice.
characters I'd never heard of, like Bongo and those guys. And then, of course, we had Saturday morning cartoons where they'd have Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the Hanna-Barbera stuff, the Filmation stuff. And I liked all that stuff, but I always thought I'd be doing comics my whole life. And so I went off to college. They didn't really have an art program there, so I ended up at a commercial art college. And they taught you everything that they taught was something that's now obsolete, of course. They taught you how to do layouts with rubber cement.
Right. All that technical illustration.
And everything was totally different. The computer came in and changed everything.
Yeah.
But while I was in tech school, I sent portfolios off to Disney. Of course, Disney was at that time, that was the time of Oliver and Company. And, they turned out 1 movie every 3 years or 4 years.
Wow.
And that was before the Little Mermaid, Great Mouse Detective, Little Mermaid boom that started in the late 80s. And so they weren't hired to anybody, and so then I went on, I went to Minneapolis. I thought I was going to be an illustrator. Of course, that's a gone goose now these days almost. But I went to a advertising agency, and the man there I was interviewing with for a job said, there's an animation studio right down the street. And I said, there is. It never occurred to me. It was called Vegas Jones Film Corporations, and they made mostly commercials, like Dutch potato chips,
Yeah.
and lots of stuff like that. So I went there, and they hired me, And I worked there for a year until they had a big layoff, and I got laid off, and then I starved to death.
Oh, shoot.
But I did meet a lot of people there.
Nicely.
I met a lot of people there. Yeah. And then I had another couple other jobs. I worked for a bulletin board company in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And finally I got a break in comics at DC. And I drew a book for a number of years called Hawk and Dove for DC.
Yes.
And, and it was a lot of fun, and it was, amazing to be, have people like Mike Carlin, the editor of Superman, calling you on the phone, and we'd go to parties and, go to Jack Kirby's birthday party. Of course, I went to Jack Kirby's birthday party, me and 3,000 other people. But I did get to meet Jack Kirby and Stan Lee and all those guys. And
long lines at the bathroom, I bet.
Yeah. And Dick Giordano, and so that was very cool. And then, of course, Hawk and Dove came to an end because DC had an idea where they were going to take a hero that's established and turn him into a supervillain.
I remember this. Okay, yeah.
And so the idea at the time, they were going to take Captain Atom and turn him into a villain. Mm-hmm. But Mike Gold on a radio interview revealed it was going to be Captain Atom. So they couldn't do Captain Atom. So they picked Hawk, which is the hero of my book.
Yeah.
They turned him into a horrible supervillain. And throughout, Hawk himself kind of looks like a supervillain. All you'd have to do is change some of his coloration. And of course, then they canceled my book. And they killed everybody. They killed the ancillary characters. They killed Dove. They killed everybody but Hawk. Anyway, so then I was kind of in trouble. Yeah. And I had this studio downtown Minneapolis, and the phone rang, and it was a guy named, I'm blanking on his name now. But anyway, somebody that I'd met at this first animation studio I'd work at. Uh-huh. And he asked me if I wanted to come to Disney as a character designer.
Oh, cool.
And, I played it cool, and, so I'm freaking out. And so I drove out there. I didn't drive out there. I flew out there and checked the place out. And, it's amazing. It's, you're on the Disney lot and all that iconic stuff that everybody's seen on every documentary ever made about Disney. Mm-hmm. And so I took that job. But by the time I finally got out there and got everything organized, they didn't have a spot for a character designer anymore. They had a spot for a prop designer.
Okay.
So I started out there on Darkwing Duck, and that was the beginning of it wasn't the beginning, but close to the beginning of, what do they call it? It was a series of shows that would be on every day at 4:00. They had a block of 4.
Okay.
And it was, shows like Goof Troop.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Ultimately Gargoyles, Rescue Rangers,
Tales,
Aladdin, DuckTales, and Disney Afternoon.
Okay.
And
that's a tough one to remember. I wouldn't remember.
Yeah,
it's just like I don't know. Is it Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles middays? I don't know.
I almost said one Saturday morning, which was when they moved everything to Saturday morning, because what happened was shows like Oprah and all these really cheap shows came in, and they knocked out everything in the afternoon for kids. And then also, cable was coming in. There was the Disney. It wasn't the Disney Channel yet.
Right.
But there was, Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network and all this stuff was beefing up. Anyway, so I came to Disney and started on Darkwing Duck. Met a lot of great people who I still work with occasionally. And so I stayed at Disney. I got a call from the people in development, and they had heard that I worked in comics and drew superheroes. So they asked me if I wanted to come up and do some designs for a new show they were doing, Gargoyles.
Cool.
Yeah. So I went up there. Of course, had no idea what it was going to turn into, but
right.
So I'd work all day, and then at night I'd go home and freelance and just draw gargoyles. And they would pick, this head, this body, these wings, these hands. And eventually we kind of pieced together Goliath. And out of that, I got to design Goliath, Damona,
Nice.
Hudson, and Elisa. And that was enough to get the show greenlit. In those days,
Yeah.
all they had to do is the guys in development would have to go up to Michael Eisner's home. You know, they had this meeting in his kitchen.
That's
It was all kind of easy peasy. You know, they'd go and pitch him a bunch of shows and he'd pick 3. You know, now it's years of development and years of rigmarole you have to go through. So Gargoyles got picked, and after that, I was a character designer.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's interesting that they would, take literally bits and pieces, all the best cuts. This is going to be his bicep. No. That one's too lean. This one looks like it has measles. Yeah, no.
And you know what? It's funny in animation. The show was created by a guy named Greg Weisman. And Greg was brilliant in these meetings because we'd have meetings and they were very concerned. The people at Disney were very concerned about Gargoyles because they were worried it was going to be demonic. And it was going to be on at 4 PM. Going to be demonic. So we were in a meeting and we're sitting there talking about stuff and so, we're concerned, these guys look, and Greg said, well, it's common knowledge that if you're an evil character, an even evil demon-like character, your horns go forward. But if you're a good character, they go back because they're not threatening. They go back.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there thinking, never have we ever said anything about this. And it just happened that the Gargoyles, most of their horns go back. Yeah. And I came out of that meeting and said, wow, where did you get that? He said, I just made it up right there. So, and they all bought it. They, if you say it's common knowledge, they're all nodding. And,
oh, yeah, well, of course. We know this.
It's common knowledge. Everybody knows. So, Gargoyle came out. It was a pretty big hit.
Yeah.
And
how many years were you on? Do you recall?
Gosh, back in those days, it was really great because they move you from show to show.
Okay.
Like right before that show, I was on a show called Duck Days when we were working on it, but it eventually came out as Quack Pack. It was a Donald Duck show.
Yeah.
And they just move you, as your end date approached, they'd move you to another show. So they moved you all over the place. So it was very hard to keep track of how long you actually worked on it. But I probably worked on Gargoyles for a couple years.
Nice.
I didn't start on the show. It went into development. We developed it. And then it was on they worked on it for a season. I came in the second season to do the characters, and there were 3 seasons. So
cool. Nice.
And long seasons too. They were like 65 episodes. So that's
seriously? I always thought, it was on for like quite a few seasons, but yeah, wow, 65 episodes?
Yeah.
That is intense.
Because that's how many they need to syndicate. We didn't really break it into seasons. We just worked on it until we came up with 65 episodes. And then they figured that at that point they could syndicate it. Mm-hmm. Of course, this was way before streaming, way before anybody had any idea about that.
Right.
And, as long as they had enough episodes in the hamper, they'd shut down a show. It's not like The Simpsons that would just keep going on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Once they got enough in the hampers so that they figured a couple of generations of kids could watch the shows without seeing them too many times, they would just pull the plug. So those didn't really get canceled as much as they just came to an end.
Okay. Huh. Wow. It isn't like also the toy business also really well tied into children's animation?
Yeah. Well, Disney wasn't that much at that time because I think the name Disney was such a big deal that they didn't feel like they had to do that. But as the things went on, mm-hmm. It changed. I worked on a show called The Mighty Ducks, which mm-hmm. I think they thought was going to be this Ninja Turtles type hit. Mm-hmm. It did fine, mm-hmm. but had a big change in executives, and once that happened, it was done. But anyway, I would get calls from Mattel saying, when are you going to do more episodes? These toys are just flying off the shelves. And I said, it's a nut. I said, really? Nobody tells us anything.
Yeah.
But I said, because we had input into the toys on the Mighty Ducks. They would bring us in and we would say, well, this is off model. We'd help them adjust the sculpts. Instead of just taking a nondescript G.I. Joe car that Mattel had done for another show, we'd insist that it's got to look like the thing in the show. The motorcycle has to look like the motorcycle in the show. You just can't pass it off as, put some stickers on it and say that it's a Mighty Duck car or something.
Yeah.
So, Mattel was really nuts over this show because the figures did turn out really nicely. And they said, this is our number 3 seller for boys. I said, what are the other 2? Star Wars. And this was back in probably 96 or 97.
Oh,
and there was no new Star Wars stuff, but Star Wars were still selling through the roof. So, that didn't matter. That didn't save the show. But even shows like Phineas and Ferb, which are very popular, need that toy merchandise money in order to be profitable.
Okay. And you did Phineas and Ferb for quite a while.
It was about 8 years.
Wow. That's fantastic.
A number of other shows like the Lilo and Stitch show. I did Tarzan. I did Hercules. I did Buzz Lightyear Star Command. So there's a lot of stuff in between there. Buzz Lightyear Star Command was the first show that I designed the look of the characters. So I got to start from the ground up, kind of. And that show was for Tad Stones, who did Rescue Rangers.
Oh, okay.
And, Darkwing Duck. So he had some really great shows under his belt. But yeah, Phineas and Ferb was the longest run, and I thought that was going to be like The Simpsons. I thought that that show had a strong enough premise so that it could continue to be made. But I think everybody just finally got tired. Because it's a sophisticated show. It's it's hard to come up with all these Perry things and all these Candace, you can't see what's happening. And they wrote a song for every episode except the very first one.
Jeez.
So, yeah. And now, the show I'm working on now is called Central Park. It's not a Disney show. It's for Apple Plus. And, they read 2 or 3 songs per episode.
Yeah.
So it's astonishing. They used to get a song in an episode of an animated show at Disney, you'd have to have some really great reason for it because it's very expensive.
Right.
I think what they found out on Phineas and Ferb was that it really jacked up the popularity of the stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the very first episode of Phineas and Ferb didn't have a song in it. But later they remade the episode from a different point of view and put a song in it. So that was kind of, and they even actually mentioned it, I think, in the episode. Shouldn't there be a song right about now or something?
That's hilarious. Yeah, well, the new show that you're working on, isn't it like from one of the co-creators of Bob's Burgers?
Yeah, it's Lauren Burchard is the creator of the show with Zach Gad.
Oh, okay, yeah. There's your musical inspiration right there. But, Bob's Burgers is very music influenced too.
Right. Yeah, and it's a great show. The only concern I have is, with so much streaming, hey, who has time to watch all this TV?
Well, we do now.
Now.
For now.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to integrate when everybody's able to leave their house and go back to work. How they're going to be able to integrate, streaming 24/7 and getting their job done. I guess that's why you got these. Just put it out here and operate heavy machinery.
Until you're killed.
It's better that than hardcore drugs, like Sudafed or Pulpery. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. This show is a different experience for me. I was at Disney for 27 years.
Wow.
So it's odd going to a different studio, and a lot of the people at Bento Box are the same. A number of them are people that I've worked with in Disney. In the animation industry is a pretty small one.
Yeah.
So
Kind
odds are,
maybe.
you've worked at Warner Brothers, you've worked at Nickelodeon, you've worked at Cartoon Network, you've worked at, a number of places around town, Disney. And sooner or later, everybody gets to know each other a little bit. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You eventually all go to Jack Kirby's, birthday party.
birthday party. Yeah. I live in Colorado now. About 12 years ago, we moved here, and I'm able to do everything remotely.
Yeah.
And it's funny because everybody's working remotely now.
Right.
Everybody gets their computer from work, and they have it at their house, and they continue with their work. And there was some hiccups at the beginning, but not for me because I've been doing it for 12 years. So
yeah, you're pretty well integrated.
Except now they've integrated all this stuff like Zoom that we never used before.
Okay.
And, so, you just have to learn the new tech, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. For this series, I've had to bring on Zoom because typically I like to have interviews in person. Obviously, we can't. Just have to adapt. I think tomorrow we're having a live illustration session with Zach Howard, who's illustrating Hellboy right now.
Cool.
And, so that'll be fun. For that, we're using like Ecamm, which integrates into Skype in order for you to do live video casting onto something like Facebook. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I'm just an artist in the sense of very tactile. I gotta physically be touching what I'm illustrating.
Yeah. I went through. It was funny because we work on Cintiq computers now, and when I started, of course, it was animation tables just like the one Walt Disney had, and you with your drawings, and you had a disc that you turned in order to make the drawings better. Make line. You turn the disc, and it helped you make a nice smooth line, and it also helped you flip animation.
Yeah.
And I had that, until probably 2 years into Phineas and Ferb. And I go back to California every 5 weeks or so, and for a week, and I work in-house or more if they need me. And so I'd have my little animation table there. And, I came back one time from Colorado, and nobody had animation desks. Everybody's working on Cintiq.
Oh.
Well, there are a few animation desks around, but I hung on to mine to the last 5 minutes at Disney because I worked on a show called Milo Murphy's Law. It was kind of a loose sequel to Phineas and Ferb, and Phineas and Ferb show up on it. And it only went 2 seasons. I'm not exactly sure why, but after that, they really had a hard time, I guess, finding a spot for me in the way things worked. And so I lost my long-time animation desk.
Yeah.
And, sorry to see that go.
Were you able to take it back home? It looks like you have an animation desk over behind you there.
Well, that is just a light table that I got. Yeah, it'd be great to have that big desk here, but I couldn't figure out how to get it here. It cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars or thousands maybe to move it from California if Disney would even let me have it. They probably still have it sitting in a room somewhere with a sticky note on it that says Greg Guler's desk, because I said, put a note on it and keep it for me when I come back, thinking I'd be right back.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. So, I still sketch. I start out sketching on paper. Just like you, I have a hard time just drawing directly on the Cintiq.
Yeah.
And so I sketch out stuff on paper still, put it in my scanner, and then manipulate it in Photoshop and clean it up and stuff. Because, if you send just a pencil drawing to people now, who are the people that are approving your work, they are also young that they look at it and they go, how come this looks so rough? And it's because of pencil drawing. But Cintiq work doesn't have the same spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same spirit as a pencil drawing to me, anyway. But
I think a lot of the people that you're probably working with are, they grew up, mostly knowing Cintiq, and they might have done maybe the sketchbook in high school, junior high thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Before they had the technology.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. I go back there now, and I'm like, people come to me, you worked on Darkwing Duck? And I'm like, yeah, I worked on Darkwing Duck. You know, it's funny because we didn't think anything of it at the time, but, you know, it's cool. You know, you did my whole childhood. You created my whole
Yeah.
childhood.
Oh,
And,
that's cool.
you know, we were all kids when we did it. So I
Yeah.
had no conception about it.
Yeah, when those shows were coming out, I was in sixth grade, junior high, and then high school for much of Gargoyles.
Yeah.
I think my sisters, were a little bit more attached to Gargoyles than I was at the time, but I remember that show. That was fantastic. But I loved Darkwing Duck.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah, I was so happy with that because I remember watching DuckTales when I grew up when I was a kid, and but when they they had little cameos of Darkwing Duck, and then kind of segued into its own show. That was my jam for a few seasons while I was in I think sixth grade.
Yeah, and it was a cool show, and it was created by Tad Stones, as I said before, and went through a lot of incarnations. Originally, he was going to be a spy,
Oh, interesting.
not a superhero. He was
Yeah,
a spy called Double O Duck.
I'm glad you went with Darkwing Duck.
And he had a tux and all that stuff, but they were threatened with a suit from MGM that owned the rights to James Bond.
Hmm.
And so then they decided to make him a superhero. And
Yeah.
obviously the people who, own the rights to the Shadow didn't feel like they had to sue anybody because, Darkwing's costume was pretty much the Shadow's.
Yeah.
And, but, it was a cool show, brilliant idea bringing Launchpad McDuck from DuckTales into the show. Goslin was great. The characters were all beautiful, mostly designed by a guy named Toby Shelton, who's a good friend of mine. And just this anthropomorphic universe of heroes and villains. They're all loosely based on somebody who we already had at the time in comics.
Mm-hmm.
But the plant guy, the electro guy.
Yep.
So it was.
You had to have those classic tropes.
Yeah, grist for the mill, and they did a great job with it. So.
Nice.
Yeah, it was very cool. And then we went on from Darkwing Duck, we went to the series Aladdin. And, it was funny because Aladdin, they took like 3 episodes and compiled them together into a DVD. And that really started the DVD Disney thing.
Okay.
And people would come to me and they'd say, that new Aladdin movie doesn't look as good as the original movie. And I'd say, well, that's because in the original movie, they had 5 years to make it, and we did our show in about 6 weeks.
Oof.
So, of course, everything was basically designed, but still,
Yeah.
On a TV budget, you can't make Aladdin. But it was still very popular, and it just kept things going. So
Nice. That's pretty cool. With what you're working on now, that hasn't launched on Apple Plus.
no, not yet. It's supposed to launch in June.
Okay.
I think everything is getting delayed because of this whole situation.
Yeah.
And, I encourage people to give it. If you like Bob's Burgers, you like Zach Gad. That's right, isn't it? Zach Gad?
I think so. Something like that. Yeah.
It's a good show to watch.
This household loves Bob's Burgers.
We really liked it too. Long before, it was funny because I'd be watching it and I'd recognize people's names that I'd worked with at Disney. Like I said, it's a small, community, and hey, there's Janelle. Hey, there's Bob McKinnon or Don McKinnon. There's blah. So I'd see a lot of names of people I'd worked with, and then, now I get to go there and meet everybody.
That's
them again. Sometimes it's been 20 years since I've seen some of these people.
Oh, geez. Yeah. With transitioning from Disney, which you've been at for 27 years. Yeah, what was like the biggest change? Was it scheduling or just the workload or?
I think the biggest difference is, there's kind of a Disney environment where, there's always so much stuff going on. I mean, you can be sitting at your table in your cubicle or your office working, and, Wall-E will come down the hall, the little robot remote controlled Wall-E. or, they have these photo sessions where, Chewbacca from Star Wars will come in and as a picture thing. They'll have parties at the lot,
Nice.
parties out at Disneyland. We used to have an annual Christmas party at Disneyland where it was just all employees. So you could run on all this stuff. I mean, you could go on 100 things a night, and you do get involved in the whole family atmosphere of Disney because they try to make you feel that way. It's a giant corporation, and sometimes you can be grist for the mill in a corporation like that. And also there was I've known these people for decades. And so, you go to a new studio, and luckily the studio at Bento Box is in the same campus as Disney Television Animation, where I've been for years. So it's just basically walk into another building that looks exactly like the one you just came from, only it's not a Disney building. And because it's a nighttime show, there seems to be more time to really finesse things and change them and try to really make them work. And of course, with a couple of new songs every episode, they really want to get it right. So there's always more work, and it doesn't seem like enough time to get it done, but we all manage to do it somehow.
Nice. That's pretty cool. So you mentioned like 12 years ago, you and your family decided to move to Fort Collins. What brought you up north of Denver?
Well, my wife used to be in the computer testing business, and she'd come up here because Hewlett-Packard was here and all those places. My wife's family lived in a little town, Torrington, Wyoming.
Okay.
And it's not really a little tiny town, but it's a smaller town. And her mom lived there, and her mom got sick with cancer, and so we decided to move a little closer. And luckily, Disney still wanted to employ me, so I thought we'd only be here for a couple of years. But the schools were so good here,
Nice.
A lot less congestion. It's changing now to the point where it's, but, just quality of life. My wife had never had seasons, she lived in Southern California her whole life. And so she experienced winter. Yeah.
One season for California.
So, we came here and really liked it. And, I could still work. So
cool.
We stayed and like I said, I go back there occasionally and every 5 weeks or so for a week, just to make it clear to them I'm not dead. And, because you have to keep people thinking of you for the next project. But I've been very lucky to be able to continue.
That's cool. With now that you're in animation and doing what you've been doing, doing character concept design, because that's predominantly what you do, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily storyboards or anything like that.
No.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah. Storyboard is a whole different discipline. I mean, people think that it's a lot like comics, but you have to kind of keep a lot of filmmaking ideas in mind. I mean, I know a lot of great a lot of great storyboard guys, and most of them are directors now that I started out with because they, Phil Weinstein, Vic Cook, Chris Rakowski, Frank Parr. These are all guys that have been in the business a long time, and a lot of women are getting into animation too.
Yeah.
So, over the years, we've all, progressed. And so it's great. It's funny when people that were your bosses start retiring. That's
Okay.
that's a tough part because all the contacts you had and all the people you work for aren't in the business anymore.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's kind of a bummer. But
Well, yeah. Yeah, I suppose, huh? The you know, with storyboarding and comic books, what do you think is the bigger difference? Because when I talk to like producers, and you can show them a script and that's great, but if you show them a graphic novel or a comic, it's like, well, there's the film practically right there because there's all the visual, because nobody reads anymore. um,
yeah,
but 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 yeah, I think when I think about it a little bit more, sometimes the comic book isn't as cinematic as storyboard, because that framework doesn't really change.
right, right. Well, with comics, you can cheat a lot of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of rules in storyboarding that you can break them, but you really kind of have to know what you're doing in order to break them.
Right.
There's the line of action. You don't want to flop around too much, because your audience won't know where anything is, and you just have to you have to learn how to do expressions and acting where characters can flow from one panel to the next without jerking, or in comics you can do anything. You don't really have to establish where you are. You do one establishing shot, and then after that, people kind of know where you are. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a different discipline, and a different process. But the basic idea is the same. You're telling a story visually, and a storyboard is great to show your director. Actually, you're really directing. When you storyboard, you're really directing. The director comes in and makes comments or changes things because he thinks this is going to work better or that's going to work better. But you're basically directing how the thing is going to look.
Mm-hmm.
And, and now there's so many places where you can learn how to storyboard, and you can learn, you can go on the computer and find out how to do just about anything.
Yeah.
So, it's not like when I started at Disney, they had a program where they brought in people to train them to be storyboard people.
Oh.
And all those people now are, directing or producing. And so they all moved up.
Yeah, I remember like watching some of the behind the scenes stuff of some Pixar movies like The Incredibles, and just watching like Brad Bird work hand in hand with the storyboard artists as well as the concept designers. I mean, they're all pretty much in the same room, and just having like those weekly meetings where they're storyboarding they're displaying hundreds and hundreds of storyboards for one sequence or one scene, and it was intense watching the storyboard guy and Brad Bird basically being interchangeable. They're going, oh, and then this happens, and then this goes, and then maybe we pull this and put this here. Oh no, we don't do that.
Yeah. And there's so many people I know that are in features at Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney, and you do so much work, and a lot of times most of your work ends up on the cutting room floor because it's the process of learning how to tell the story in the most efficient manner.
Yeah.
And a great example of that is you take the animated Aladdin, and then you take the live action they just did of Aladdin.
Yeah.
And you see why they cut out everything that's in the live action version. I mean, it's padded, and the original Aladdin, the animated one, is a honed story.
Yeah.
They took out everything. Disney gets a lot of crap because, the parents aren't there, the mom isn't there, the dad isn't there, there's only one parent. That's because they aren't integral to the story.
Yeah.
They don't matter, don't put them in.
Right.
And Aladdin originally had a mom. But as the thing progressed, they've decided, does he need a mom? Do we need this dialogue? Do we need them to stand around talking about stuff? Did they move the story?
He had a mom.
He had a mom, but she's not cool. So
you just don't need her to show up.
You don't need her to show up, and that's why many of these movies don't have both parents, because you don't need them for the story to progress.
Right.
Yeah, and then you watch the live action one where they've added all this extra stuff because they got to make it a 2-hour thing, and just going, all this clunky stuff doesn't contribute to the telling of the story, which is the most important thing.
Right. Yeah, that's something like in regards to like the Disney remakes. Yeah, like you said, stuff can feel padded. It certainly does for me on a lot of it. Not that I've watched a lot. I haven't seen the Aladdin one. The trailer, made me feel conflicted.
Well, avoid the Dumbo one at all costs.
I wasn't interested in that one. Let's see here. The Beauty and the Beast one compelled me not to see it. God, I'm a real judgmental prick. That's the Cinderella one, also compelled me not to see it. The one I did see and I really, really enjoyed was Maleficent, because it changed the point of view of the Sleeping Beauty, story, and focused on the villain, making her more of an anti-hero. And I thought, wow, this is and that one actually, now that I think about it, I mean, it was like a 90-minute movie. It was very streamlined to just tell the story and not much else.
Yeah, and if you're going to do that, you're telling a different story. You're not just regurgitating the same story that we've all seen.
Right. So it wasn't a remake in the strictest sense. It just used those Disney archetypes and just pivoted.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. Even the sequel, I don't think it was as engrossing as the first one was for me, but it was still pretty good for follow-up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Everything's on hold kind of now.
Yeah.
So, because nobody wants to release anything. So we'll see how that all plays out. I was going to say something else about storyboards.
Yeah.
Usually in an animated cartoon, there's two techniques of getting that story produced and done. One is script, and one is a storyboard-driven show. A script-driven show is what mostly I've worked on. That's where you get a script that's like a movie script.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's 38 pages long generally, and it's just like a movie script. It has the dialogue and all that stuff, and the guys take that script and they go off and storyboard their section of it. It's broken into usually 3 sections, and they storyboard theirs. Well, a show like Phineas and Ferb is a storyboard-driven show where they have a loose idea. It's almost the way Marvel Comics were done.
Right.
Stan Lee would come up with a loose idea and give it to Jack Kirby, and Jack Kirby would take it away and bring it back, and here you have the story, and Stan would put the dialogue in. Well, that's what Phineas and Ferb was like. Phineas and Ferb, they would split the story up. They'd give it to the guys, and the guys would come back, and it's the director's job to piece these 3 pieces together and have a coherent story that worked. And of course, they'd go in the conference room and hone things and fix them. And, here's the song. Usually one person would do the songs and other person would do the story part. And that really works great for comedy.
Nice.
Because, people come up with stuff like the giant baby head. Who knows where that came from? Just somebody thought it would be funny to have this giant baby head floating through the sea.
Yeah.
And that's how that kind of stuff happened. So
just by accident, or it sounds like maybe even force of will, just because
it just somebody's creativity thought this would be funny, and then it kind of takes off, and then you have to explain in retrospective.
Yeah.
What was the baby head about? And you don't want to say, well, the baby head was just somebody thought it'd be funny to put a baby head in there, because then it turns into a legendary thing, And, that happened a lot on that show.
That's great. Well, and with that show, like there's that level of sophistication, but it sounds like it was that method to that madness.
Yeah,
that it was magical.
It's kind of amazing that they managed to do it. Even when I was there, they'd go into the conference room for a couple hours and come out with a song. And I'd say, so you guys are taking a break? I think we got it. Well, what's the name of the song? Get You Goo, Baby, I Love You. I'm going, okay. And it didn't,
that's
big long.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, those type of brainstorming sessions too, like whether it's intended or not, can really give way to absolutely magical little moments and innovations, and sometimes not. But yeah,
Look, if you've got a group of people that all understand where you're going or what you're trying to do, everybody wants to contribute it in a positive way.
yeah,
So the most important thing in a situation like that is not to say no, your idea is no good, because then
right,
you shut down and don't say anything. Who wants
yeah,
that to happen to them? So, and they had a great bunch of guys that really wanted to raise the bar, and they did. Dan Povelmeyer and Swampy Marsh, the two creators of the show, made that possible by the atmosphere they created in with the crew and everything. So
nice.
worked out great.
That's pretty cool. I was talking about like storyboarding and everything too. I'm kind of reminded of a couple of years ago. There was a documentary that came out, on the movie, or on the novel Dune being adapted into a feature film back in the early '70s. And the documentary was Jodorowsky's Dune. The filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky. And, he didn't know what Dune was. He just heard it was really popular, and he's like, he's kind of that person of energy and also arrogance too, but brilliance. Yeah. And just like, I will adapt this novel into a movie, and then he read it and learned about it and stuff, and he's like, crap, this is a great movie. This will be a great movie. This is a great story. And he got oh shoot. It just spaced my mind. Crap.
Is it an artist?
Yeah, the artist
Mobius?
Mobius, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
He grabbed Mobius to be his storyboard artist. Turns out they shared the same agent. He had moved to France, and he was asking his agents, like, do you know this guy who produced these Western comics? And he's like, yeah, he's out in the hallway. So they connected, and unfortunately, and he is, from that experience, he had assembled this massive production team. This team went on to inform and influence Star Wars, Alien, Blade Runner, you name any sci-fi movie, and they were pivotal in informing and influencing what came after that. But the movie never got made because it's just so gargantuan. But the script and the storyboards that Jodorowsky and their writer and Mobius worked on just ended up being this massive Bible for this film that was so influential. So in that too, it's just like having your director and your writers and your storyboard artists. It took a team just to assemble it and get that far.
Yeah.
Even though it never got produced, it's so massively influential and important on how to go about and building these projects and making them and just doing the storytelling.
Yeah. Well, it's always amazing. The people at the helm really have to know what they're doing. And enthusiasm is great, but still, in order to get the thing done, you have to know what to do, what not to do, how much to do, how much you can do.
Right.
And I think some of these projects, something like Dune, Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings still astonishes me that it ever happened.
Right.
I have lived and worked out there, and I know how, it's really astonishing that anything comes out and works because there's so many hands. It's not like drawing a comic book where there's a writer.
Yeah.
artist, there's the inker, there's the
Yeah, it could be a small intimate team on that. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you really have to know your stuff and really have to be able to stay on target when you're
Right.
in a show
Well,
like that.
I think anytime anybody makes a piece of television or a piece of film, like nobody sets out to make a bad anything. Um, Sometimes, there's missteps and somebody has too much of a hand that shows that
Right.
can make things go awry.
Yeah, the hand at the tiller makes all the difference. So blame the executives, I say.
That's usually my first go-to. Yeah, there's a number of projects that I'm still fans of, even when they go south.
Yeah.
A lot of the DC films can be that way, but
It
I
can
still
be.
love
I'm a after having worked for DC for a number of years, it's hard to watch things go awry when people don't really understand the source material.
Right.
Like anything, it's important to understand if you take an established character that's been around for 60 years, why is this character popular?
Sure.
Not to, dissect it into something that it's not meant to be. A lot of comic book projects, I think, suffer because they put so much weight on them they can't support the weight. Something like Batman is a fantasy. Mm-hmm. If you make it too real and make it too I don't even really know the word, but if you try to make it too I guess realistic, big, yeah, it starts coming apart. Something like Superman, he takes the glasses off. No one recognizes that he's Clark Kent. Once you go down the road of even addressing that, the whole thing kind of starts unraveling like a sweater.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the problem. I've got a good friend named Dan Jurgens who did Superman and stuff for years, and he wants to make it very clear that it's not DC making these mistakes; it's Warner Brothers.
Right.
And so I would say, why is DC? And he said, it's not DC. It's Warner.
Right.
Because they're what they're trying to do is different than what DC tried to do, and all comic companies have made major missteps also. Right. So, I remember Wonder Woman in the 70s when she turned into
the kung fu stuff. Yeah. And she was like a spy or a secret agent. And...
Yeah, Emma Peel. They Emma Peeled her.
Yeah. But, okay. Well, and then even in the 90s, they gave her the jean jacket or the leather jacket stuff. You had the extreme superhero 90s and stuff.
Right. And that part of that is, you've still got to have fun with it. And Marvel's really done an amazing job with their movies. Who would have ever thought 20 years ago that there'd be a Ant-Man movie? It was like a joke.
When they announced that, I was just like, okay, I can accept Thor, I can accept Captain America, but
Ant-Man's a tough one. Doctor Strange. There's another character that you just, and for the most part, even the ones that aren't probably they aren't masterpieces, they still all follow. And they're all still pretty good movies. And if you took one of those and you put it in 1980, we'd think it was great. Thor, the Dark World, look at him. He looks like Thor. And there's these dark elves. And, that's the one that people seem to pick on the most. And we would have thought it was great, So it's just because our expectations have risen quite a bit that, we're criticize these movies. All we had was the Hulk, Bill Bixby.
Yeah, well, even like with Doctor Strange, they had I think a TV movie or something back in the 70s.
They did. Yeah, curly hair. That's about all I remember about it.
Yeah, I remember the mustache.
Yeah.
He had that porn stash. It was like, yep, this is not Doctor Strange.
Yeah, and no budget, and
Yeah. Yeah, it's and then around that time they had the Christopher Reeves Superman, which was I still really enjoy watching that. That one. Of course, I think that one was really ingrained in my childhood, so I still have fond memories.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing that in a theater, and I got to meet Dick Donner, the director, and I said, Superman. The first time I saw it was one of the 3 best movie-going experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
And of course, he said, "What are the others?"
Right.
And I
That's
said,
going to be my next question.
I guess it was 4. I told him it was one of my 4 best movie-going. Of course, Star Wars, Jaws,
nice,
and Rear Window. I saw Rear Window
released in the theater,
sometime in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by a great movie-going experience, the audience became one person.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the Superman credits, and we'd never seen anything like that. These big letters come on the screen, and the music is going. And I remember looking around the audience, and everybody was just like, and this was after Star Wars. I mean, this was, and then when, the helicopter's on the top of the building, and Lois is hanging out of the helicopter, and Clark comes out of the building, and he's just walking along, and he sees her hat, and he picks it up, and I don't know how far we're into the movie, half hour, no Superman yet, and then music starts, and he looks at the hat, and he looks up, and runs to the phone thing that's just it's not even a booth, it's just one of those cabinet ones, and
okay.
he looks at it like this, and I looked around at the audience, and the audience was going like this, come on, and when when he takes off into the air, and the same thing in Rear Window, when Lisa is in the other apartment, and Raymond Burr is coming up the stairs. I remember the audience, just everybody, and this was a movie from 1960, late
something
50s.
like that, yeah.
And it was really working. Another one was The Incredibles, when people were jumping up and down, and then it was really great movie stuff.
Yeah. The Incredibles, I always refer to that as the best Fantastic Four movie ever, because that's the first family. It's not that in terms of story, it's that in terms of theme.
Yeah, and it's great too when Mr. Incredible, everything works in it so well. Where Mr. Incredible says, "I wasn't strong enough," and she goes, "You're not strong enough? I couldn't lose you again," and all that stuff. That is great stuff, and the music is great. Everything's great in that thing.
Yeah.
So movies and TV shows really can. I've had a lot of people come up and talk to me about Phineas and Ferb, and if they, they'll say, I have an autistic son, and the only time I can really get much out of him, and he'll react, is when Phineas and Ferb is on.
Oh.
And, I kind of, that's really great. But after the 30th person came to me and told me the same thing, I started going, what is it about this?
Yeah.
So I went back, and I was sitting with Swampy Marsh, who was one of the creators of the show. And I said, has anybody ever told you that their autistic children react positively to Phineas and Ferb? And he said, yeah, a lot of them. Well, Ferb is autistic. I'm sitting there going, what?
Oh.
And knowing that and watching the show, you can see that he might be mildly autistic.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if that's got anything to do with why autistic children react to the show. It's just that it's funny and colorful and cool. And
have they ever talked to experts in the field and
Yeah, no, I never have. I never have talked to anybody who I do have a. It's funny. We go to the Denver Comic Con, as you know, every year, and I've got people that have been coming to that con since they were little. What year is it in? The 8th year or 9th?
Something like that, yeah. And this year it'll be during Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, kids that came, people that came to my table as kids, are now adults.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, some of them are autistic, and I can see that they progressed, and, you know, some of their parents talk about it, and you know, hopefully, you know, that's another good outcome from a TV show, you know, cartoon show.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's pretty remarkable when people can connect over the things that they love, and, you know, especially with, you know, children who are autistic, you know, be able to kind of come out of, yeah, and might be, you know, this might be a bad reference, I don't know, coming out of a shell of sorts, but
Yeah.
you know, seeing them, you know, kind of light up or be able to engage a little bit more, and
Yeah.
having like friends and witnesses, or family members kind of witness and be able to participate a little bit more with their children on that level.
Yeah.
I think, you know, anybody who's able to connect over something like that, you know, that just brings people closer together, you know,
Right.
no matter what it is, except for torture porn.
Yeah, we don't want to go there.
Yeah, it's like, you know.
And that's one of the strengths about all this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, when I was a kid, there was no fandom. There was
Right.
no, you know, there were no Comic-Cons. There was none of that stuff. And so you were basically, if you were into this stuff, you were pretty much isolated unless you had a number of friends who were also into it. And I think that is why a lot of people are so passionate about it, because maybe they did have some little life support group that helped them. You know, for me, it was Star Trek. And for, you know, people who really enjoyed Star Trek, the original series, that's where really this convention thing came from.
Mm-hmm.
I think originally the Comic-Cons were just, you know, tiny little things. But once these two things merged and they had a prototype to go to with this Star Trek stuff, that's when things, you know, of course, then celebrities started showing up in San Diego. I remember I was at a San Diego con, and at that point, it was much like the Denver con is now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was comics. But anyway, Francis Ford Coppola was there because he had the new Dracula movie coming out.
Ooh.
And so I thought, I got to go see this panel. Francis
Right.
Ford Coppola is at the Comic-Con.
Yes.
So we go there, and Francis Ford Coppola's there, and he's talking about his new movie, Dracula. And near the end of his presentation, Arnold Schwarzenegger walks out on the stage. And I can't remember why he was there, but here's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And Francis Ford Coppola on the same stage. And I thought at the time, this is going to change everything. Because, and this was before the internet. I said, this is going to change everything because the celebrities and the directors and the people who make these things are starting to understand how powerful it is to reach out to your fan base in this way.
Yeah.
And of course, after that, it went crazy nutso.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you could go to a Comic-Con and be walking around there and see Chris Evans. You could see Hemsworth. You could see, you know,
Momoa.
Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
You know, I saw the whole cast of Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones was a deal. You know,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what it was. Game of Thrones, who's that little guy? You know, and and you know, that's opportunities for people that is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah.
You know? Problem is, it got so big that it's almost unmanageable now.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you want to see anybody, you got to go to Hall H and sit there all day so that you can see whoever it is you want to see.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit oversaturated, but you know, that love of things, I think, is like right now, that since we're so self-isolating, because we have to, you know, we got to look out for each other. Yeah, and the best thing we can do is just stay home.
Right.
But that's another way that we can reach out to each other on something like Zoom or FaceTime, or, you know, however, and just kind of commiserate over, you know, all these things that we love and endear.
That's right.
In the regular world.
If you can't talk about politics, you can also always talk about Terminator, or you can talk about,
Right.
you know, whatever your deal is.
that can be more of a common thread that
Yeah,
kind of breaks all barriers.
that's absolutely right.
That and a good recipe for mom's apple pie.
Well, anytime. Pie is that anytime thing.
Yeah, yeah. My mom lives pretty close to where you are, so I'll let her know to ship some for you.
I'll take a pie any day.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, one more question. We're just about ready to start, winding down. But when it comes to comics, is there anything that you miss about working in comics? And I could have sworn, and I might be wrong. Didn't you do a couple gigs for Marvel too?
No, I have never done anything for Marvel. The only work I've done for Marvel was on Phineas and Ferb when we did a crossover thing with
Oh,
Hulk and Thor and Spider-Man. Mission to Marvel it was called. I came close, I think, a couple of times, but I still love comics, and I think down at the core of my being, I still think of myself as a comic book artist. But the industry changed so much. By the time I got out of the industry in 91, we had that golden era with Watchmen, Dark Knight.
yeah.
Comics were really starting to really expand and bend what comics had been at that point. But then the industry changed so much that I don't know if I could. I don't think I could work that hard anymore. I don't know how people who are married and have families draw comics, because when I drew comics, it was, 12 hours a day, every damn day. And you have to really be passionate about it. And so that means you have to have an editor that cares about your book. You have to have writers that are really into it. And I was lucky. I had Mike Carlin, I had Barb and Carl Kessel as my writers. Carl Kessel is an excellent inker.
Oh, nice.
He's inked a bunch of Superman. He's inked a lot of stuff, and he's great. Back in the day when I was doing Hawk and Dove, we had a run, and it wasn't a big seller. It was like 40,000 a month. Mm-hmm. But now it'd be the number one book with 40,000 a month.
Yeah,
so
true.
The industry has really, when everything started, everything started going out of local drugstores and, grocery stores into just simply comic book stores. I think it really curtailed a lot of how I got into comics. I mean, I would get comics at my local drugstore.
Me too.
And I'd run from, the drugstore to the grocery store to make sure I didn't miss issues. And now there's just too much competition with video games, streaming.
Right.
I remember one of the things I did the last time I went, right before I moved to California to work at Disney, I went with a bunch of guys to see Terminator 2. Mm-hmm. And we were all sitting there in the theater watching this movie, and it's a great movie, and the credits roll and the lights come up, and Dan Jurgens turned to me and said, "Comics are dead." I said, "What?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Because if you can see this on the screen and it's moving and it's live action, why would you read a comic book?" Of course, he loves comic books and he's still working in comic books, but he kind of saw the writing on the wall that it's really hard for a comic book to compete with, the Marvel movies even. Because I run into a lot of kids and they've all got the Marvel guys on their shirts, and it says, "So what books are you reading?" None of them are reading anything.
Right. One of the things I was thinking about was, for something like the Marvel films, or any type of comic book film adaptation, I was thinking, it's like, what you should do is like every time a movie ticket is sold for one of these films, and since most of it's done, online anyway, they should get an automatic free email download of a comic book for that film.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and or if there's an adaptation to a specific story, you get that free little download that goes with your ticket. I mean, there's absolutely, when it's digital, there's no cost because
Right.
things
It's already done. And
yeah. So that would be a good way to shoe in people, and then have like a limited stock of like the print stuff, at least for opening weekend. You know, for every physical ticket that's bought, or for anybody that walks in, you get the 3D glasses. If 3D is still even a thing, I don't know. I don't even bother with those films because they're just a gimmick. But you know, you get the glasses, you get the comic. It's like, oh, that's cool. You can sit there and read it while the credits are playing or something.
Right. I think that'd be a great idea. But, you know, I still love the paper pamphlet in my hand where I can sit and go back and forth and I can look at the artwork. And it'd be a dream come true if comics really had a resurgence to, you know, not, so you don't have to hear that DC might go out of business every month or
seems like every month. It's just like, oh geez. I totally agree. I love the textural artifact in my hand.
Right.
I still do that with Blu-rays. I
Me
don't
too.
do that with music just because, you know, I don't have the time to look through the bins. But I do love the hunt no matter what of looking for new things that I can be a fan of.
Yeah.
And, you know, find that passion over. So speaking of which, when you table, do you have like, single issues or, collected works of your Hawk and Dove run?
I don't really have much of that stuff. I mean, back when I actually worked for DC, you'd get everything that DC published that month. So, you know, we'd get a big box of comics. Yeah. And, but I can't remember what we used to get, 100 copies or something of each book. But that was back in 1987. So I don't know. I don't have many of those anymore. And, you know, honestly, if you open up one of those books now and you look at it, compared to the comics now, of course, they're beautifully colored. And you know, my stuff looks pretty rudimentary. It's pretty, it looks like something from the 30s. But, I don't really sell a lot of Hawk and Dove stuff. I do sell prints and I do sell original sketches and stuff like that at my table. And mostly I do it because I like meeting the people. You know, as you know, everybody thinks, you know, even if you work for Disney, they think you're sitting at a desk and Mickey comes by and, you know, it's like this fantasy world you're in. But really it's many hours by yourself working, concentrating on what you're trying to do. And it's really great to get out and see and meet people that are affected in some way by your work. Yeah. And, you know, mostly as artists, we're thinking of, you know, trying to make the show as good as we can in the time we have. You know, there's a vague idea of entertaining people. Yeah. But, you know, mostly you're on a deadline and you're trying to get the work done at the time. So the next person down the row, you know, as a character designer, the next person that has to do it is the colorist. The person has to color it. And then they ship all that off to the animation studios. And if you're late with your work, that colorist is late with her work. And then that's late getting shipped. And so that's the pressure at the time. Right. So it's great when you get out and you meet people that love your work and know it. They know it better than I do, you know. So because, you know, people come up to me and say, did you draw? And they'll say a name, this character in Gargoyles, did you design this character? And I honestly can't tell you anything by that. If you have a picture of the character, I can remember or recognize my own drawing. Right. Because it's a go. Yeah. So it's really great to meet people and understand that your work does affect them positively. They do enjoy it. It means something to them. And, you know, otherwise these Comic Cons wouldn't exist because we wouldn't want to meet anybody. Right. So, and, you know, they're thrilled. They're sometimes very thrilled to meet you. So, you know, that's very nice and affirming for what you've spent your life doing. And I enjoy that part. That's wonderful. Greg, I think we need to wrap up here, but really quick, where can people go to follow your work or connect with you? Well, I don't really have a lot of places to do that. I do have a website. Just look up Greg Guler Designs. .com, and you can see a lot of my stuff. If you just go on and look me up on Google, there's a lot of my work there over the years, but some of it that oddly had nothing to do with me. I don't know how exactly that works, but yeah, that's basically it. I have Greg Guler Designs .com, and you can find me there.
Wonderful.
Of course, the Denver Comic Con. Come to the Denver Con, even if it is Thanksgiving.
That's right. It's called Denver Pop Culture Comic Con?
Yeah. Yeah.
Come after the turkey.
When the tryptophan is kicking in. And
that's right. Make Black Friday Denver Pop Culture Comic Con, or whatever it's called.
Excellent.
We butchered that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Greg, it's always a delight to be able to, chat with you and talk shop and stuff. You're a really fun person and very inspirational. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's great talking to you too. Always look forward to it.
I appreciate it. So with that, I'm Daniel Crosier. This is Talking Palettes, whatever the hell that means. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.